Robots Radio presents...
Nerds, geeks, and dweebs alike love their particular fandom and often challenge those around them to resist the temptation to become fans themselves. Welcome to Resist This, a podcast put on by Focus Fire Chat, where I, green-eyed music lover, and Blue Crew 86 challenge each other to consume various books, TV shows, and any other fandom-inspiring content, then discuss the ups, downs, insides, and outs. This episode, we feature a fandom of mine, the Stormlight Chronicles. I challenged Blue to read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, first book in the Stormlight Chronicles. Okay, I'm gonna drop the accent because it's just so silly, and I don't think I can keep it up the whole time. But so, Blue, what was your first impression of the book?
It's good. It is. I will preface my entire thing with it is not for someone who's looking for a light read.
Yeah, super true.
It's which, if you are looking for something to really sink your teeth into and like you want a full meal, this is definitely the book or books, to go for. If you're looking for something that's, this is definitely by no means a short story. I think the copy that I have is 1,200 pages. Mm-hmm. And it's a thick book. But it's good. It's good. But you have to it's not one of those books that you can just read casually. Sure. I know longer books that you can read casually. This one's very much on the same page in my mind of the Kashyyyl series, where you have to pay attention to, because it's got the political aspect.
Right.
I haven't read Game of Thrones, but that's what I imagine most of that would be similar to. I read the first Game of Thrones and I thought it was trash. And so
there are some definite writing style aspects that they do very similarly. Yeah. The switching of perspectives of writers. So Sanderson does this particularly in this series more so than his other ones. And he definitely goes from one character's point of view to a totally different character's point of view, back and forth. Well, a few different ones. I think there's 3 different point of views most of the time.
There's
sometimes more.
Yeah, I know that the book calls out 4 primary people. Mm-hmm. Out of curiosity, we might edit this out, but out of curiosity, was this written after he was contacted by Robert Jordan?
I actually don't know. I would imagine so.
Yeah, because the layout here, like you say, what you just said makes me think that that style rubbed off on him, because this is very Wheel of Time-esque kind of hopping that he does.
Mm-hmm. He does this in a lot of his books, though.
Oh, okay.
This is not unique to this series.
Okay.
You had mentioned how thick the book is, and when I was introduced to Sanderson, I was introduced by a friend of mine named Allison, and her husband Sean. They're really big fans of Sanderson, and they suggested the Mistborn series first. The Mistborn series is a much lighter, easier read than The Way of Kings and the Stormlight Chronicles, but the Stormlight Chronicles is much more impactful. Mm-hmm. I think there are some darker themes played on. Both books have some major transformations of the characters, but Way of Kings is a lot more gritty and touches on some of the darker aspects within ourselves that most people struggle with, I think, a little better. So that's why I suggested Stormlight Chronicles for you, because you tend to enjoy that kind of read or that kind of show where it's a lot more gritty and more real feeling.
Yeah, and it definitely he does a really good job dancing on that edge between punishing the heroes unnecessarily, which is what. Yeah. What I mean is it's not like the Game of Thrones let's just kill everyone for no reason.
Sure.
But he also doesn't do the whole heroes are immortal. He puts his heroes through the ringer for sure.
Yeah.
But he does it in
his heroes make a lot of mistakes.
They do.
A lot of mistakes.
Oh my God. It's so good, because that's what I was going to say. It's it's believable, because he gives his heroes he gives, air quote, as any author gives, but he gives the heroes the perception of a choice between like paths to take. And, and there are times when the heroes choose right and things go pretty well. Like, I mean, there's always something that, will happen.
Sure.
But like he has a good mix, I think, of like that real, like what you were saying, that realistic, like, hey, you have a choice between going right and left. And if you choose right, it looks easier, but it's probably going to screw you up more. But you don't know that. But, but if you choose left, that's the harder path. Or it looks like it's the harder path, but it's actually the safer path. And the character of Dalinar, for instance, he constantly goes left because I'm pretty sure he's a masochist. But like there are times when that actually works out really well for him. But there's also a lot of times that doesn't, and like the other characters think that he's an idiot sometimes because they're like, why are you doing this? Like, you're making this more challenging for no other reason. And that gets called out,
right?
Like that gets called out and addressed, and I love that.
And it gets even further fleshed out further in the trilogy. Well, there's a 4th book being released actually this next month, but there's 3 books out currently as of the time of this recording, and Dalinar's transformation from when you first meet him in book 1 to where he is in book 3 is enormous, because he deals with his own inner demons, which is the thing that I love most about this whole path that Sanderson puts the characters on, because the Way of Kings is built around this magic system of these interspersed planes. You have like the plane of thought and of will, essentially. And then you have the mortal plane, and there's a couple of different factions on the mortal plane fighting to either destroy the plane of thought or honor, or the concept of honor, or another one that is kind of more trying to bring back the concept of honor. And honor is a god who is dead and is absolutely dead through all of this. And it's interesting to see the character struggle with the idea of what is honor and what does it mean to be honorable, and how do I honor the concept of the god honor, which they don't quote unquote believe in. They're just traversing this path, having now I can't think of the name of it. What is Syl?
Oh, oh gosh. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
She's essentially like a Tinkerbell character.
Yeah, she's
in
like
a lot
an
of ways.
essence. It's, I know, like
Sprin.
Yeah,
that's
Sprin.
what they're called.
Which I love because I really liked the concept of Sprin. Actually, like the entire magic system, I think, is what you actually you tricked me into getting into it, because I love like I love unique magic systems, and like the magic system here is really, really unique. I really like. It feels really thought out, and it feels like even though he doesn't tell the reader what's going on, you can tell that there's a logic behind it that's driving, the rules, air quote, if you will. Which
he does eventually explain it.
Right. But I mean, what I mean is, like, even in this first book, even though you're kind of learning it the same way that Kaladin, the main character, one of the main characters, he's figuring it out too. And you're kind of learning it along, you're walking that path with him, which I really like. But like the whole concept of Sprin, I think it gets called out pretty early, actually, because I think Kaladin's the one that asks. He's like, do the Sprin cause it, or are the Sprin reacting to it? Like, it's the pain Sprin, I think. Like, I like how every aspect of our existence has this like concept of this magical interweaving of the world, but it's like, you don't know if are the pain Sprin causing pain, or are they created and reacting to the person who's experiencing pain. Like, what's the chicken and the egg, basically. And like, even they don't really know.
There's the moment in the first book where Dalinar, this kind of kingly or knightly character, him and his, I want to say brother or nephew, I think it's the nephew, do a race to the top of the hill.
Oh, yeah.
And there's honor Sprin.
That's his, I think it was his nephew. I think it was his nephew, yeah. It was either the nephew or Adolin, his son, because I think they were the ones that had the, the shard plate? Yeah, because that's when he was like, he like forgets himself for a couple seconds, and
Right. But Honor Spren Sprout
Right.
on the
right,
winner,
yeah.
which was the nephew, because the nephew is the king.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Then and it does sprout around the king because Dalinar let him win, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And he just had that sense, that elation. And there are strong emotion based Spren. There's Spren for air Spren. There's all sorts of different kinds of Spren in the world. And it's basically, you think about the concept of how Greek mythology and really any major pantheon, how they have different, not necessarily deities, but some of them deities that explain concepts. Same kind of feel in this book with that.
I got a really big like Native American concept of like the world is alive, like it's Gaia. It's like, you know, but it's not necessarily self-aware, because like a lot of the Spren don't know that they are in existence. Like they just are, which is what
some do.
Well, and right, there's a hierarchy within the Spren, and then there's also something that's not Spren but is very Spren like, you know, there's like this distinction that kind of you get introduced to later on in the book. But like the predominant majority of the Spren are just kind of like this almost like anima, like it's just like the spirit that is just visible to the people.
And it's interesting because, and this is a realization throughout the book, is that you don't know if you're necessarily reading the good guy's side or the bad guy's side.
Oh gosh,
ever,
yes.
Ever.
I mean,
it's always up in the air on whether or not it's good or bad, because you're reading it from the perspective of people, and their perspective is always going to seem
everyone is a hero in their own story.
Right, but it's very clear as you're reading that some of these characters are not good people necessarily. They have major issues, but they're not evil in the black and white idea of evil. They have problems, and when they interact with others, they can cause even bigger problems. Like the very first character of the book, Seth Son Villano.
Oh my gosh, he is one of my I love all the four characters. So, like, I think that was one of the questions that, you know, we'll get to, or which characters did you like the best and which characters you like the least. Like, of the four, Seth was one, or Seth, or however you want it. He was up.
Seth.
I mean, he's honestly up there with. I view him with Kaladin and Dalinar as just like the most intriguing character, and it's simply because you don't see a lot of him, but the pieces that you do see of it, he's like the epitome of someone who has allowed honor to completely dictate his life. Like he is aware of what he's doing, but because, and I'm assuming that we find out more about his situation, but like because of his situation, you know, basically he's indentured to various individuals for, we don't know, like, I get the sense that it's not necessarily something that even if he wanted to, he could go against, but we don't know that. Like right now, at the end of the first book, the sense is that he is doing it out of honor, and he holds to that a great deal. Oh my gosh! Throughout the entire series, it just there's things that shift. Oh my gosh, he defers so much responsibility, but that's where I kind of come back with. I'm like, I also don't know if he actually has a choice. Like he definitely doesn't want to do the things that he's been forced to do. Like, and like the very first thing you see from him is him struggling with what he's been ordered to do.
Right. And one of the interesting things in this first scene, and it's the very first scene in the book. The first scene of the book, Seth has been charged by a culture, a group of people who are at a truce festival or festivity evening with this other country, and the country that is doing this truce with them have ordered Seth to kill the king of the country they're doing the truce with, that they're celebrating the truce with. And like he is supposed to assassinate him.
Right, and he's also supposed to do it in a very, like, he's ordered to do it in a very specific way.
Yes.
To frame certain, like, I mean, it's a very political statement. And the entire time, like, and he's so powerful. Like, that's the other thing that I really, like, I love the dichotomy with his character, is because he is, I would argue, one of the more powerful characters in the book.
Currently, yes.
But he is also one of the weakest characters because of this whole indentured that he is, like, he basically has this Achilles heel of whoever has I can't remember if it's
stone.
Like the stone or whatever, that basically if you hold the stone, he's your slave and he will do whatever you tell him to, even if he finds it despicable, which, like, I love his one, what was it, the stepping on stones is
he
heresy,
hates it.
his heresy to his
Stone
culture.
walkers.
I love that, like, little nuance thing where, and it's like it's constantly called out too, because it's constantly like he has to step on stones to do, like, the task, and he's constantly having to, like, throw sand in the face of his culture, and mostly because the people who control him don't have any idea, I think, about his culture.
Right. And there's other things within the book and the various cultures. The Alethi culture is very odd because women are the only ones allowed to read and write.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And the men are not, but the women have to cover their, I want to say it's either their left hand or their right hand completely.
It's their offhand. That was another thing, is like, what happens to the people who are left-handed? Like, do they just not, like, is it something, because what is it? Is there safe hand or whatever it's called? And they have, like, I think it's a really cool concept, but they have, like, that cultural, like, you're not, it's very taboo.
The women, the women are still forced to use their hand, the one that is allowed.
Free hand, yeah.
Before we dive into a little bit more this discussion on, like, we've done a lot of likes. I kind of want to get into some dislikes too, but let's take a quick ad break before we dive into that.
Tune into the Spinfoil Theory podcast for questions. Who is an orc? Who's an orc? What is an orc? What is that? For queries.
Did the Hive really just body shame the Vex into changing their frames?
For special guests.
All the guests.
For Spinfoil Theories. Mara
Even the
saw
one thing
the
is
Sabbathoon. The Spinfoil Theory podcast. Insert information here. So why didn't he didn't give the information? Give the information.
Spinfoil Theory is available on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. You can also get us at Twitter at Spinfoil Theory or spinfoiltheory@gmail.com.
Okay, so the hand thing is interesting because there's no right and left-handedness ever mentioned that I can remember in the entire trilogy. So it seems like it doesn't matter for that women are forced to use that one offhand for things, unless they're common people. Some of those women wear gloves on that hand, and it's considered kind of lower class to do so instead of just completely wrapping the hand.
Yeah, because they had, like, sleeves, right?
Yeah, there's the common one is to have a sleeve, but he has pockets, like, in those sleeves, or like purses in those sleeves, and it's like, that's brilliant.
It is, but it also made my head hurt because I was trying to figure out, like, how that works. Like,
I'm thinking,
you have, like, a big bulb on your end of your sleeve or whatever.
Well, you know those hand warmers, those old-fashioned ones that you see women wear to the operas? My head went similar to that, like, but instead of it being a separate...
The puffs that they put both... Okay.
Yeah, so it would always stay on one hand throughout whatever. If the woman would take one hand out to talk about the opera and stuff like that, and then she'd put it back in there when they were cold and walking. So she never, like, took it off and just, like, held it to her side. One hand always stayed in. So in my mind, as far as, like, how that looked, it was still a dress, a cloth dress, but it would have this kind of effect where the woman could slip her other hand in with that hand. So that's where the pocket would be.
Yeah, because, I mean, the pockets were not small. Like, because I think, Shaylin is one of the main characters. She's the
Shallan,
or Shallan, the liar, basically. It's the one that, like, Kaladin's the surgeon, Shallan's the liar, Seth is the assassin, and Dalinar is the prince. Is kind of the thing that they mentioned on the back of the book. And that's, like, the four major characters that you get introduced, obviously, to a whole host of other characters, but those are, like, definitely the four that, it feels. And actually, talking about something like Shallan was really a struggle for me. Like, I
love Shallan.
Right. And I get the purpose of Shallan, but like I struggled with her character because like the other character, and this is, you know, obviously my bias, like Kaladin was really easy for me to connect with because like I kind of see his perspective. Dalinar was very easy for me because the whole, like, again, the perspective is very similar to my own. Seth was really interesting because it was so foreign. Like his character was just so foreign. Shallan was just kind of like, to me, Shallan felt like filler. And I understand, like, as she grew, she definitely grows. And by the end of it, like, her character actually is very interesting. But like when she was first introduced, I was like, who is this? Like, what is going on?
Her character does get a lot more treatment in the second and third book, I think, as far as why she is the way she is. I'm trying to remember if the story of the light and the safe, that calling to her, is in the first book or not.
The big thing with her were the characters with writing as heads, which was like really Silent Hill-ish. I kind of got the sense of, like, they were kind of like, they weren't really pyramid heads, but they were kind of like that sense is kind of what I got from them. He definitely presents her Sprin, the cryptics. I can't remember if that's actually what they're called, but I always thought of them as such. Yeah, that's a good name for them because she also has that really weird photographic memory. And oh my gosh, the ending where the anti-hero is actually, like, the antagonist actually finally gets revealed. Like, I don't want to spoil it, but like, it's not who you were expecting. I was like, oh, like, that actually threw me for a little bit of a loop. I was really pleasantly kind of surprised by who actually is working again. Like, I don't really know. I don't really know if he thinks that he's a bad guy though. Like, it's that whole thing. It's like, I'm like, you're not helping, but you're not, like, the people you're hurting. Are you helping some? Because we like, literally, you get introduced to him, like, I think 2 chapters before the end of the book. So you have, like, no concept of his motivation really, other than what he kind of is, like, he says. But like, I was like, oh my God, what? This came out of left field. So good. That twist. I really like that twist.
It is real nice. Now, here's what I want to find out from you. Was there anything that you were like, that you liked least about this book?
It was the confusion of the system, which is like a loaded criticism because it's also what I liked about the book. But like,
are you like the political system, the magic system?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I remember when I read the prequel, which, like, it kind of it throws you in the deep end, and it's a sink or swim. It's a sink or swim approach. And I remember I can't remember if I messaged you or if I just thought about messaging you, being like, what the hell is going on? Like, I'm so confused because, like, you get thrown into the tail. Like, the very first thing you get thrown into is this battle that seems important, but you have no idea what's going on. It's not really a battle. It's like the end of a battle. And it's literally like half a chapter, it feels like. And then it ends, and it's like, okay, 4,500 years later. I'm like, what? Like,
yeah.
What? Like, okay, so that obviously is important. And then
it is.
And then you get the introduction of Seth and his whole assassination. And then you get another time jump. I think it's like 5 years. And then you get into the meat of the book. And so it's like, I'm like, okay, trying to keep track. Like, I felt like I needed to put a mind map together to keep track of, like, what's going on. But, like,
I can definitely say, for somebody who has read or listened to this book probably 5 or 6 times now, it is better. The stuff that happens in the beginning that is really like, oh my God, what in the world is going on here? It gets better the more you read the book. Right. Like, if you read it over and over, because you're going to start piecing together those things. Yeah. The opening battle, you're getting magics and swords. And it's like giant rock creature.
They're like, put the sword in the stone. I'm like, what? Why? Why are we putting the swords in the stone? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
And that is a very important moment to the overarching story, like the meta story of this world, that you don't realize until way, way down the line. Because it goes the meta story, a mini story, because there's quotes at the beginning of each one, and I'm actually going to read one of these quotes.
Oh my gosh, they're so interesting and so infuriating, like just I'm like I see, like there's definitely like about the 10th or 15th one, I'm like, okay, what in hell is going on with these quotes?
Oh,
and then,
I love it when this comes together.
Right,
that
and
part,
then like I've started, like, I think it's near the end where they start kind of I know there's been a couple mentions with Dalinar's daughter, I think, the heretic one,
Yasna.
Yasna, yeah, she has made a comment about him, and I think she was the one that made a comment because she's the researcher that's doing all this like crazy stuff. And they made a comment about that. And then at the very end, the air quote big bad. He's not. I don't think he's the big bad, but he's
not the big bad.
Yeah, I think he's one of the steps to the big bad. He's a harbinger, I guess, of the big bad. He also makes a comment of it because that's ultimately like one of his things that he's been doing. And so like it's like, okay, there's definitely but I'm like, what is, like, the reading it at every chapter, I'm like, because at first you put quotes at the beginning of a chapter and it's like, okay, this is, something that has to do with the chapter. No.
Or with the world.
It's like, no, this is just a random quote, it feels like.
It does feel that way until you get further in. And the best way I can describe how Brandon Sanderson writes in comparison to any other author that I personally have exposure to, Sanderson writes books as if he's running a D&D campaign where instead of having the entire group with him all the time, he's working through their backstory with them for a very long time and slowly bringing the group together. And the concepts that you're getting with these quotes, that is a mini story in the overall world that does eventually have weight in with what's going on, but it doesn't directly tie to any of the main characters. So it does stand apart, and he's broken it up beautifully throughout these chapters. I'm just going to go ahead and read the very first quote. In this is the prologue. This isn't even the first chapter. This is prologue. The love of men is a frigid thing, a mountain stream only 3 steps from the ice. We are his, O Stormfather. We are his, but it is but 1,000 days, and the ever-storm comes. Collected on the first day of the week, Pala, of the month Shash, of the year 1171, 31 seconds before death. Subject was a dark-eyed pregnant woman of middle years. The child did not survive. Now, we were talking a little bit about things we don't like. That concept, dark eyes versus bright eyes, I had a very personal, visceral reaction to that because it reminded me of Nazism. I know it's not, but it had that feel as like the blue eye kind of concept.
Well, and it's not just blue; it's also like the lighter shades, right? And I like there's a character, Wit. He kind of points out, like, I think it's like one of the last sections. He makes a comment about. Hang on, let me see if I can find it real quick. But he makes a comment like he's like, "This is silly." Like that they find like, oh gosh, what is it? He basically makes a comment about like how stupid it is. But then he also, but then he qualifies it. He's like, yeah, but I've also seen like really stupid things. Like he's like,
right?
Why? Like this doesn't make any sense. But it also, in the light of everything else, he's like, there's been other stupid things that people have chosen to follow other people for.
This is true, and Sanderson does actually write a reason why very likely that Bright Eyes became considered higher in the hierarchy versus the Dark Eyes. And that is because, and I don't know how far you get into it, but it's because of the Spren themselves and the power they imbue.
Oh, okay.
Their eyes change with that.
Yeah, here's this quote. He says, "That crazy man happened to have blue eyes, which let him get away with all kinds of trouble. Perhaps Wit should have been bemused by the stock these people put in something as simple as eye color, but he had been many places and seen many methods of rule. This didn't seem any more ridiculous than most others."
This is true.
He's not the only one who makes that comment either. I think one of the slaves, is it Rock? I think his name is Rock.
Oh, yeah.
He makes a comment about it too. He's like, "You guys are crazy. Like, you people pick like the weirdest thing." I like that the like even in the world there is disagreement about something as actually important as the determination of who is ruling who. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's really cool.
Airsick Lowlanders.
Oh my gosh, I love Rock. Is his like his whole thing of being like, because he's the one that they're like, do you know how to shoot a bow? And he's like, maybe. Mm-hmm. They're like, are you going to shoot a bow? No. Okay, well, we'll figure it out. Well,
I love his character because his character has this sense of honor of because of his birth order, he's not allowed to be a
that's right.
warrior.
Yeah.
He is bound by his own honor of his culture to not be a warrior, even though he has done that and I believe like has defended things, but he's not allowed to kill another man. He's not allowed to wield weapons. But he does know how to use them, and he uses them well.
Yes, he does.
He chooses to be a cook. That is his thing.
Make a stew.
Yes,
but yeah, no. As far as like one of my biggest dislikes, I guess it's intertwined with my likes. Is that this book is definitely a slow burn. Like this is a slow. I remember like when you first started telling me about this book, the reason why you were saying, you know, hey, give this a read is because I was complaining because of the whole Wheel of Time situation, which we can, you know, get into later. But like after reading this book, I totally understand and see why Sanderson was chosen to take up the mantle of Jordan for the finishing of the Wheel of Time, because their styles really do align very well with regard to that particular structure.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's do that right after this little ad break real quick, and we can finish out this, the Resist This. I am quite proud of that. Anyway, ad break.
Are you worried you don't have all the answers?
Have you ever found yourself in an internet rabbit hole?
Call Mystery Time Live today! It's a new detective business.
With plenty of heart.
And a questionable track record.
We're only in the office for an hour.
Every Wednesday.
Come hang out.
Solve a mystery.
It's a podcast.
It's a live show.
It's a swell time.
Subscribe now!
The producers of Mystery Time Live ask you kindly not to take any advice or guidance of the host because they have no idea what they're doing. No mystery will actually be fully solved unless interpreted by a spontaneous outside source or sheer luck. You can find them live on the Twitch app and find their podcast later on YouTube, Anchor, Spotify, Google, and iTunes. Listening may cause hurtful your death or loss of sanity. We are sorry. This is probably legally binding and you cannot sue us.
Okay, so you mentioned Wheel of Time. I know your resistance to getting into Sanderson was because of him finishing Robert Jordan's epic. Mm-hmm. How did he finish just the last book, or did he wrote a couple of them? I thought.
Yeah, they split. So like the story behind that was Robert Jordan, like he started Wheel of Time, and basically it's very sad. He ran out of time. I think it was cancer he died of, but. Like when he originally the book series was supposed to be like 13 or 14 books, and I think it was around the time that he published the 11th book that he saw the writing on the wall well before then, but he also like thought he could get it done. He realized around the 11th book that he couldn't, and so they reached out, him and his wife reached out and kind of chose the the person that they were going to pass on to. And Sanderson was the one that they introduced. And I think they actually co-wrote one of the book, like the 13th book or something, they co-wrote. And then Jordan died and Sanderson went on to finish the series, and actually ended up splitting the last book into two books, because there was so much like in Wheel of Time that had to be addressed at the end, because they wanted to end it, not like do it stupid.
Sure.
Hey, next time, like whatever. And there were so many threads that were being spread through Wheel of Time that he wanted to do them all justice. And like, when I first heard about that, my initial thought was, oh, this guy's just, basically writing the coattails of a really decent author and basically kind of using it as an excuse to make more money. Which I know is not a very generous view, but it's really hard because I've seen it happen a lot.
Sure.
Sanderson actually, like, after reading The Way of Kings, like, I really think that I think it was a genuine thing. I think that I'm actually willing to go back and read the books. I have them. I just haven't read them yet. Because, life. And they're not, like, Wheel of Time is like, every Wheel of Time book is like the size of Way of Kings. Like, it's a huge series.
Sure.
It's a huge, massive. It is a lot easier to read. Jordan is a lot less cryptic in his, like, there's things that Jordan slips in that you don't realize until you go back and read, like, after you've read it a couple times. But, like, he's not as nearly dense of a read as Sanderson, which makes me actually really interested to see how they marry their styles up, because Sanderson's concluding everything. I'm like, how does that work? Like, curious that. But yeah, that's how I got introduced to Sanderson. And then I remember talking to you, and you're like, oh no, he wrote, because I think at the time, I think you were reading Mistborn at that time. I can't remember.
It's funny because Sanderson is an interesting writer in that he doesn't just stick with. He has a formula. I will say that. He does have a formula. But he doesn't stick with the same concepts with each formula. Like, the Stormlight Chronicles are very much so this power struggle between these realms, as well as between these nations in some ways and races. But the Mistborn series is more post-apocalyptic in some ways, which is also the feel in Way of Kings. Don't get me wrong. There is post-apocalyptic feel there. But Mistborn has more of a chosen one feel to it. It's a lot easier to read. It's a lot less dense. It's a lot less cryptic. A little, just an easier read. But he also has things. The last grouping of the Mistborn series takes place years after the main story, and it's a slightly different technology age. If you think of like D&D style, like you have your different ages, you can have your fantasy versus your steampunk and stuff like that. And he's played even in the steampunk realm. There's a series that he's written that's steampunk based, which is
he strikes me as
Julie's
someone.
like,
he strikes me as someone who would fit really well in the Dishonored universe.
He would.
Like
I think
his style of writing, I think when you say him and steampunk in the same sentence, that's the first thing that comes to mind is Dishonored. Like his political acumen and like presentation of political strife and struggle really is along the lines of what you see within Dishonored and Dishonored 2. Like he does a really good job of like everyone is really politically good,
in
like
some ways,
good,
yeah.
like they're really good at like kind of doing that subtle dance. But there's not really, you kind of said this at the beginning. There's not really like one person who's like, aha, you're evil. Like, it's like,
right.
It's everyone is doing this thing for what they perceive to be the greater good, which naturally puts them at opposition to, not necessarily their enemies. Like there's a scene within even Way of Kings where one of them backstabs their closest friend or closest friend, air quote on friend, but like,
sure.
But like they are basically, there's these two characters who are basically brothers to each other, and they don't necessarily see eye to eye, but they respect each other. And there is a scene where, one of them stabs the other one in the back, and it's a huge scene. It's a very important scene. And I love the culmination because someone finally gets called out for some of the stuff that I'm like, thank you for calling this out, because it's like one of those, like, it's one of those things where it's like everyone knows what's going on, but no one will call them out on it. And then finally it snaps, and he's like, nope, I'm done. Like, yes, which I'm sure is going to come back and ruin people in the next book. But
I will, after we're done recording, since we're avoiding as many spoilers as possible, I do want to know which one you're talking about, because I have a few in my head, and I can give you a little hint whether or not it goes on. But
I think
would you
we already kind of talked about it, because it's near the end. It's near the end. It's like one of the big betrayals that happens.
Gotcha.
But it was good. It was so good, and it was so organic. Like you know, a lot of these like they're not really cliffhanger betrayal, but like a lot of these like big betrayals, it's very hard to write that in a way that it's not seen as a way to push the story forward in a very artificial way.
Right.
Sanderson did a really good job in like it's 100% in character on all sides, and it's almost tragic in the sense that it was kind of inevitable that it was going to happen. Like you saw it coming, and you're just like, no, it's a train wreck. Don't do it. Like, be better. And then the character, of course, is like, nope, you're going to do this, and I'm going to, take this opportunity. And it's like, ah. But
would you read another book by him?
Yeah, I'm already on the hunt for the second one. I will.
Oh,
I will.
good.
I'm going to try to read. I think it's Radiance. I think is the one.
Words of Radiance should be the second.
And then Oathbringer is the third one. Yeah, I'm gonna try to find the second one. So yeah, it's one of those books that I definitely. It's like Kashiel, like the Kashiel's Darts trilogy. It's very dense. It's very very hard to get into, I think, but once you get into it, it sucks you in. Like it's like the best and the worst part of it is that it's a very dense book.
Yeah. I think the thing that is probably, if you know this going into The Way of Kings, if you know that you're going to be following broken people doing broken things and learning how not necessarily to like push aside their brokenness and become better. Like there is an aspect of that in it, sure, but it's not a superhuman effort. They will fall down. They will mess up. They will cause problems. They will cause problems for other people many times over.
Sometimes even deliberately.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But
they also have so much growth. That's what I love about it.
And it's honest growth.
Yeah.
It's not a superhero book. It's not a D&D campaign where your character is just going to be lawful good all the time. These are definitely not, with the exception of Dalinar, who is not lawful good. He's lawful, but he's not lawful good. Just going to give that out there. All these characters are they're all very neutral, and that is something I appreciate because they are real life people in my mind.
That, and when you say neutral, I mean they are neutral. They are
very neutral.
They will do bad things. Like Dalinar is an example of that. Dalinar does, and Dalinar, like, I like Dalinar's neutrality because he doesn't necessarily try to do the best thing, but he tries not to do the evil things. And when he realizes that he does something that could be perceived as evil, there's one scene that I remember near the end. He does something and he's like, "Oh, I see how that could be perceived as bad." He actually has that self-reflectiveness where he's like, that was a bad thing to do. Like in like, it's not necessarily, he doesn't necessarily change, like he follows through with it, but he's like, he recognizes, he's like, this is not the best way to do this, but he feels like he has to. I like that. I like that there's a separation between what the characters see as the perfect, like, archetype, and they're striving to be that archetype, but because they are not perfect, they don't achieve it, like, nearly ever. There's
real consequences when they don't.
Oh yeah,
real consequences. There's one I don't think it happens in this book. It happens later on in the series, but there's one consequence that you're like, oh my gosh, this character's gone. Like, this character is done. He can't do it anymore. Like, there's no way.
Well, Shallan nearly had one of those moments when she...
Shallan? Oh my gosh.
She got caught and she nearly ended up being gone, like, because she did something stupid. And but then it was like she did something and then she tried to cover it up, and her covering it up was actually the problem. Like, it was like this, oh my gosh. Yeah, I love the characters. I think that really is where the strength and the focus has been. Like, the world is really fascinating, but those characters, like you were saying, like, the fact that they are imperfect is both infuriating and addicting, because you're constantly like, there's one scene near the end where like I was reading the chapter and I'm honestly like, I don't know how this chapter is going to end. And I really like that in a book, like when you can't really know where it's going. And the best part,
telegraphed.
And the best part about it was like, it could have gone one of two ways. And I was like, I would have been upset if it ended the way it didn't, but like one way. But I was like, I would have been upset because I wanted more of this character. I didn't want this character's story to end necessarily in that fashion. And but at the same time, both of those endings would have been completely acceptable because they were organically driven by the choices that led to that point. And it was just like, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I hope that this happens, and it ended up working in a certain way. But I'm like this requires another character to make a choice that it's not it's not in their best interest to make this choice. And they technically at that point in the story were not making altruistic choices. So it was a very interesting point, and I really liked that drove home the whole thing of like that the concept of it's called Sonder, the concept that every single character, every single person that you meet has this full story that does not necessarily interact with each other. And it's like every certain character has this thing, they have their own story. It's like a I think you said this, it's like the collection of all these backstories and the slow merging of the characters into a group. But there's gonna be points where, like throughout the book, there were points where they actually bump into each other. Like the characters all bump into each other multiple times before they actually realize, or not realize, but because like even now they haven't really realized, but before they start like actually working together, there's constant like little pats of their threads.
There are moments, and you could see I think the best description I've ever seen is a dungeon master for like D&D pulling all the webs together slowly. You see them coming together. Yeah. And I would say my last question before we close this out is, does this book on a cliffhanger, or is it a good standalone?
Oh my god, the cliffhanger. It ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But it's such a really good one. It's such a good cliffhanger. It is. I love it. It ends with wit. Like that's the best way to end this book is the ending. And Wit just like he feels like he's an important character, but he really isn't present in a lot of stuff. Like he's definitely like I almost view him as like a Merlin like character. Like he's kind of there giving advice when it's needed. Like he kind of pushes a couple things. But oh my gosh, yes, it ends on a cliffhanger, and it's the most beautifully frustrating thing about Wit. Wit is an important character in all the books, but you still learn nothing about him. You only get the barest hints, and it is the number one thing that I am angry about not having gotten not nearly enough in the last book that came out. So I am excited for the fourth book to come out because, good Lord. I have a theory about Wit, but I'm sure there's tons of them, but like it definitely ends on a cliffhanger, and it's definitely got serious implications of what's going to happen. Like it's, oh my gosh. But I mean, I go into a book, if I know a book is a part of a trilogy or a series, cliffhangers, I'm like, that's part of the process to me. It's when the series ends and they do the cliffhanger at the end of the series that's when I get annoyed, because I'm like, don't do that. Like, just end it. Or if
the series is like the Kingslayer series and Patrick Rothfuss never finishes the third book, and it's been 10 years and we're working on it. I'm so mad at that man.
Give him a break.
It's been long enough, Patty. You get that stuff done. I want to know what happens to Kavoth. Anyway, that's another episode. I don't have a closing for this yet, so we're just going to say goodbye. So say goodbye, Blue.
Goodbye, Blue.
Night, guys.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.